the Lionesses have a bounce back performance with a 4-0 win over Netherlands on match day 2. This is Group D, the group of death. Goals in this 4-0 performance come from Georgia Stanway, Ella Toone, a brace from Lauren James. But the biggest point and factor in all of this is this shutout win comes just 5 days after a very unconvincing 2-1 loss to France on match day 1. Lori, I have to know, what tells us more about England, the loss against France or the win against the Netherlands?
I think they both do. I think it's one, they started the first game and it was just a tough game, right? They got a goal that was called back and then kind of lost their way or really lost their way against France. Credit to them because that was an excellent performance. And it really wasn't until like the last 12 minutes in that game for England versus France that we saw them come alive after the first 10 or 15. So big chunks of that game where they were non-existent. But for that team that has won the Euros previously in 2022, but then also made it to the final in the World Cup in 2023. I mean, this is a team that has championship in their bloods, right? They understand what it takes to get through a tournament. They have to fight. And so I think mostly why I say both is because to rebound after that loss, after the way they played and put in the performance they did, made a few little changes because there was a big question mark about Lauren James and her starting that game with really just having about 30 minutes under her belt before the tournament, dealing with injury. But for her to come in, put in the performance, I mean, first of all, the ball from Hannah Hampton was just insane. And that's the quality. That is the reason why she's starting, her ability to play make, but then also the Lauren James finish. And then she adds a second one to the four-goal tally. But regardless, it's a response, the movement of Lauren James to the wide forward role, bring in Ella Toone, and just a little bit of shifts in personnel, but also Jess Carter in her more favorite position, playing as a center back. Greenwood plays as a left. That was an issue in that first game against France. So I think it speaks to the entire group. You just make some changes, but also the mentality shift to be able to come back and respond, put 4 goals up. And now all of a sudden, when we all kind of coming into this game being like, is this really the group of death? It looks like maybe France is going to steamroll through. Well, now it's wide open again. No one could make to the knockout stages until the final day. So Sunday's going to be fun.
Yeah, I think she hit all of the nails on all.
Do you want me to keep going? Here we go.
When you have a conversation about like which is the real England, I think that we have to talk about Serena Wiegman's ability to adjust tactically where she knew she had to, right? Like when you switch out Ella Toone, or rather Beth Mead for Ella Toone, you're getting more stability and somebody that can get more active in that midfield. That midfield played a huge part in this match, particularly in those overloads where you made sure to kind of suffocate Viv Miedema, who that's a masterclass. You need to shut her down on her own. She's lethal. But I think that defensively, that helped out Hannah Hampton a ton because I feel like a lot of their issues in the last match were due to just, it looked like a lot of just disorganization or confusion defending set pieces. Some of the just, there wasn't that person to lock it down and say, hey, here's where we need to be. Everybody game faces on. So the game shifted tremendously based on what, maybe like 3 or 4 changes.
Is that enough though to actually dictate an entirely different performance? Because aside from in the first game against France, aside from the opening 10 minutes and then the closing 10-15 minutes, France dominated that game, right? They absolutely destroyed playing through the midfield against England. And to make a couple tactical changes, yes, does allow Lauren James higher up the pitch to be more into space, to use a little bit more of her creativity higher up the field. It opens up a little more space for Kira Walsh centrally as well. There are ripple down effects, but it was just one personnel change for England. And the entire mindset of this team looked vastly different than what it did 5 days ago. To go in such a short amount of time to have essentially 2 different teams from England is very surprising to me.
Yeah, a little bit surprising, not super surprising. I'm with E-Man though. I do think that Greenwood and Carter, that switch to get yourself 2 ball carrying defenders made a huge difference here. Do I think that that made a big impact here? Yes. Does a simple change like that impact in bigger games? Like, do I think this would hold up against like a Germany? I think they'd have a hell of a more dicier time against Germany. It's just tactically how you match up and lean into your strengths. They were able to suffocate Netherlands where they only got 4 shots off all in and one was on target.
Yeah,
Um,
that's big. I think
I
they
the
were
also
able
think
to
the big
negate them.
Yeah, I also think one of the biggest issues in that game too is that they just gave the ball back so easily to France. And then that's where France is going to hurt you because if you're trying to play direct quickly, the ball's going to come back at just at the same space or same speed. And then there's gaps in between England. And then they were chasing, right? And that's again where France thrives. It's their space in between the lines. If you can get wide backs isolated, and those are the exact areas that they took care of business against England. In and around Keira Walsh. This game, they did drop Georgia Stanway more consistently onto that back line, or sorry, into next to Keira Walsh. But then also, it was just much more compact. But also France's front line, their front six, you should say, because I'm just going to say that you can bring on all three new players, is a completely different threat than what Netherlands had as well. But I do think this is much more like the England team that we would expect to see and are going to see. Sometimes it takes teams, you're a little rattled in the first game. That's what seemed to happen after those first 10 minutes. And so I do think it's positive to see from England to have the mentality shift, to take care of business, because we've seen what Wales can do, but also this is the second defeat in a row. They've lost 3-0, now 4-1. Those are big deficits, and you're fighting for your life, right? So, and this will be a huge matchup on Sunday between those two teams, but England should now and has set themselves up to take care of business in that game. Not that it's not going to be a fight, but they needed that win today. And I think they knew that, or they didn't know that.
D is incredibly close and tight in the standings and how things are shaking out. If you look at it, France is at the top, then England, then Netherlands and Wales. No team is eliminated. No team has clinched yet. Everything will come down to the final match day that is on Sunday. Of course, the first tiebreaker is head to head. Laura, you mentioned having some of the first game jitters or first game stress or first game, I don't even know what, for England perhaps coming into this tournament. There was a lot of mentally turnaround from Serena Vigman to have the fortitude to say, okay, I'm not going to make that many changes. I'm going to stick to what I do as a manager. That is not changing a lot of players. She did that with England in 2022. She did that with Netherlands in 2017. Not a lot of rotation in the starting 11. And she did the same thing with this game, not benching Lauren James despite a questionable performance against France at times. Instead, a player recovering from injury like Lauren James, who played less than 30 minutes prior to this tournament since April due to a hamstring injury. There was a lot of questions as to if and why Lauren James should even be on the roster, questioning to have her start again in this game. But Lauren James was the epitome of a turnaround player that shook off all the noise from outside, got the start in the front line in this game for England against the Netherlands, and ends up with a brace, Christine. Tell me what that says about the character of Lauren James and the type of player that she is needed for this England squad.
I think that Lauren James has this mental toughness to her where if you tell her and she's being counted out, and I'm sure she's heard it, that she will only work harder. She's come back in. She's obviously proving that she's fit because the entire conversation around her was, why would you call her in? She's untested. You don't know if she's fit. But she was in a lengthier list of returning rehabbed players for this England side. So, if anything, she stood up. So was Greenwood. So was, you know what I mean? This team needs to come together, but I think that she's more willing to step up. She had to do this too for Chelsea. We saw her come back there. It was a little bit slow. She fought her way back. I think that you can never, ever count her out. She's extremely talented, but she also has this incredible work ethic that pairs with it.
If we have to look ahead to the Wales game, how much change could we potentially see in Serena Vigman's starting 11, Lori, if you think from game 1 to game 2 to game 3 to get out of the group?
I don't think we're going to see very many changes. Yeah. She didn't change it at all in 2022. And she's known as a manager for historically doing that. So I also think there is something to said. We just had the France Wales game, and there were 7 changes from France. And in some ways, you could argue that that's too many changes, right? Now they got the victory, and Lauren Bonnaday, their manager for France, also said previously, even coming into this tournament, that they were going to make changes in this game in particular. And I have known that is typically pre-planned rotations. The second game, you want to get the win the first game, you make some pre-planned rotations, and then put yourself in the best position. And by the third game, you're kind of sticking with your main group, barring any sort of few little tactical changes.
How much does that have to do with France having a really young squad, a pretty inexperienced squad too?
Well, I mean, I would say they have quite a bit of experience, but a lot of it is inexperience on the back line, which I think is something we can talk about, especially later on, just with like missing players. But I mean, you have Kashawi, you have Gioro, you have Diani of Katoto. I mean, name them, like Majri. All these players have played in like a big championship. I just think it's about Lauren Bonnaday wanting to rotate players, to keep players confident, knowing that they can, especially after they got that victory against England in the opening game. But there are always questions about, like, you know, what is right, what's not, and maybe just the pluses and minuses is the best way to go about it, right? Because sometimes you can almost make too many changes where you disrupt the continuity, and then you want to go back to the starting 11 that you made in the first game, the third game, and then, you know, they haven't played as many minutes. So yeah, I mean, I just don't think we're going to see it from England. And there's research enough, even though it's a heavy load for these players. 3 full days in between games gives you maximum rest to be able to recover and be ready. So, but it is a challenge, especially with tactically and just the level of play physically that we're seeing at the women's game these days.
If Lauren James has anything to say about it, she proved today.
Oh yeah, no, get her out there. I'm all for Lauren James, one of the best attackers in the world. You're doing whatever you can to keep her on the field.
Let her cook.
Higher up the field too. That proved today that higher up the field, she's much more effective. Goals in a variety of ways. Lauren James, Alessia Russo was spectacular in that game for England.
Assist machine. Well. We expected more goals out of her. Instead, she's like, let me get a hat trick of assists. Sure.
Exactly.
Selfless queen.